Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Black Media Collective's Stay Woke and Vote virtual forum. We actually had our first forum in the general election of 2020. It was so well received with people telling us how much the event helped them to dissect all of the propositions and how to, navigate through all of the newly instituted at the time voter registration and polling processes. So we thought it was very critical to, once again, have this forum. And we hope that you'll be more empowered and gain some useful insights about this midterm election after tonight's event. First, let me tell you a little bit about the Black Media Collective. We are a group of dynamic media professionals representing all facets of the media industry, including broadcasting, radio, TV, advertising agencies, social media, outdoor, with many, many years of experience and knowledge from our small but mighty board of directors. We believe in the power of networking and to plant the seeds of future growth of Black professionals within our community. Our vision of how to do that is through knowledge sharing, mentorship, scholarships, and of course, job opportunities. The Black Media Collective will empower the voices and faces of current and future Black professionals and executives. And for more information on who we are and what we do, be sure to visit theblackmediacollective.com and find out any type of way that you think you can contribute to our organization and help our cause. So without further ado, let's get this forum started. I'm going to introduce you to our moderator for the evening. She definitely is a leader and a legend in the broadcasting industry. Pat Prescott is a native of Hampton, Virginia, a graduate of Northwestern University. After teaching junior high for 5 years, she started her radio career at WYLD-FM in New Orleans. Pat has spent much of her 47-year broadcasting career in New York City, beginning with a stint as music director and midday announcer at legendary jazz station WRVR. She held a number of positions at WBLS and WLIB, including morning show host, news announcer, talk show host, and public affairs director. For 13 years, Pat was the morning show host at New York's smooth jazz station CD 101.9. During her 21 years at The Wave, Pat co-hosted with Grammy-nominated saxophonist Dave Koz for 6 years, followed by a 2-year co-hosting collab with Grammy award-winning singer Brian McKnight. And most recently, before announcing her retirement from The Wave, Pat was the solo host of The Wave's morning show. You can also find Pat participating in many community causes and events throughout Los Angeles and around the country. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you my friend and former colleague of 94.7 The Wave, Miss Pat Prescott, your moderator for the evening.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm delighted to be here for this important conversation. Super excited about my colleague, Dominique DiPrima, who is going to be joining us for the second part of this conversation and get into the nuts and bolts of some of what we're going to be voting on. And I'm also really excited to welcome Dean Logan, who's the county registrar and clerk, who is going to join us too. Just a quick word about the Black Media Collective. This is an incredible organization that is dedicated to doing what broadcasting was really established to do, which is to serve the public good. And I think that you'll find it to be a great resource if whether you're interested in broadcasting or whether you're just interested in trying to figure out how broadcasting works to serve our communities, because this kind of event that we're doing today is the thing that's really most important. I want to mention that we're going to be posting this entire conversation online. That'll happen later on this evening. If you have questions, we want you to just put them in the chat. They're going to be answered on our website at theblackmediacollective.com. I will mention that again later, theblackmediacollective.com. You'll be able to go to the website and see links to view this on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We promise there's going to be a lot of information tonight, and you're going to want to share that information too. So we'd like for you to post the link for your network and then share it before the critical election that's coming up on Tuesday, November 8th. And with that, I would like to introduce you to Dean C. Logan. Dean oversees the department that's responsible for registering voters, for maintaining voter files, for administering federal, state, local, and special elections, and also for verifying initiatives, referenda, and recall petitions. If you've gotten married recently too, you might have run into Dean's people as well. And his job is not a simple one. Los Angeles County has more than 500 political districts and 5.2 million registered voters. It is the largest and most complex county election jurisdiction in the country. And I've had the pleasure of talking to Dean every year about what's going on with the elections. We're going to do that right now. Please welcome Dean C. Logan, registrar-recorder and county clerk. How you doing, Dean?
I'm doing good, Pat. It's great to be with you, and really appreciate the collective doing this tonight, helping us get the word out, and hopefully this will generate some turnout in the election.
Yeah, that would be really great. Let's jump right into this and start to talk about the voting options for residents of LA County. I know a lot of people who actually have voted already.
Yeah, I think that that's probably the place to start, is that the voting period for this election has already started. Every registered voter in LA County was mailed a vote by mail ballot, and many of our voters choose to use that method of voting. There's multiple ways to vote and return that ballot. But our in-person voting experience started last weekend too. We opened 118 voting locations last Saturday. Those are open every day leading up to and including on Election Day. And then this coming weekend, that'll expand to 640 locations throughout LA County. And probably the most important thing for people to know is that you can go to any one of those locations in LA County. You don't have to go to a specific assigned location. You can go to any vote center that is open. They're open from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. again, every day leading up to Election Day. And then on Election Day from 7 in the morning till 8 in the evening. So lots of options in terms of locations to cast your vote. And if you still have that vote by mail ballot sitting at home and you want to exercise your right by filling out that vote by mail ballot, you can return that by mail. There's no postage required. You can drop it at a drop box. We have 400 drop boxes located throughout the county, or you can walk it in and put it in a ballot box at one of those 640 vote center locations.
You know, Dina, unlike a lot of places around the country, here in Southern California and really in the state of California, it seems that officials have been working as hard as they can to make it easier to vote, where in some places it's been the exact opposite. I would imagine a lot of thought and attention goes into doing that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, California, we are fortunate in California that we have a solid set of election laws that are really written and designed to encourage voter participation. Sort of to your point, that becomes challenging when there's a national narrative and you're competing with states that have that would be what we consider the swing states, that have the contest that may end up controlling who has the majority in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House of Representatives. So a lot of our national media focuses on the election laws in those swing states, and unfortunately, many of those states don't have the same opportunities and the same access to voting that we have here in California. So to the extent that we can get that word out, that here in California, the system is designed to actually ensure that everybody gets the opportunity to vote, and have multiple options for doing that.
As you improve the way that people vote and make it more accessible, I would imagine that big part of your job really is updating people on the things that are new. And during the last election cycle, we did have some new technological developments that were coming into the voting booth with us. Talk a little bit about that and how people have adapted to using the digital devices and going to different polling locations and voting early, all of those things. Do people know enough about them, and what has really changed as far as those digital things?
Yeah, I think that people who have used the new voting technology and the new in-person vote centers have found them to be very intuitive and very easy to use. But to your point, those who haven't experienced it may have some questions. They may be concerned about it. They may be intimidated by it. We want to try and erase that mystery. So the technology that we use is actually what allows us to make every one of our locations available to every voter. So when you go into a vote center and check in, you're using an electronic roster. That's simply where we access the voter registration database, confirm that you're a registered voter, have you sign the legal oath so we can issue you a ballot, and also make sure that you haven't already returned a vote by mail ballot. So then once you have that blank ballot, you go to our devices, which are referred to as a ballot marking device. They're labeled that way on purpose because the actual ballot is still that paper, human readable ballot. That's what's going to come back to my office and be counted in the election. That's what's available for post-election audits and for transparency. So there's no concern about data or hacking in the background, but the device actually assists you in marking that ballot. And it is a touchscreen environment. You put the ballot into the device. It walks you through each contest. It'll let you know if you have missed an opportunity to vote on a contest. It will allow you, there's a number of accessible features. So if you need to see the ballot in a larger font, if you have a language preference and you need to listen to the ballot through the audio ballot or just see the ballot in a different language, you can customize in that regard as well. So it really is designed so that every voter has the full range of options of voting. But at the end of that, it prints that ballot back out for you. You can physically look at it, make sure that it matches the choices you wanted to make. And then you as the voter decide when you're ready for that to go back into the ballot box. And again, that'll be coming back to us to be tallied on a separate system.
Yeah, you know, another thing I really liked when for the first time that we were using the devices was the amount of help that was available. I mean, people were right there that would come right over to you and show you anything that didn't make sense because it is a new process. And I think a lot of times, people like to do things the old way because they're familiar with that.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to emphasize, right? Is that the voting process belongs to the public. We're here to facilitate it, but it is the public's process. So we don't want anybody to be embarrassed or intimidated. If you have questions, that's why we're there, is to help facilitate your voting process. So don't be shy about that. If you're concerned, if you mess up, we all have that experience. If you mess up your ballot and you need to come back and get another one, we can help you with that as well. We want to be sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote and to feel confident that that vote is going to be counted.
You know, a lot of things changed during the pandemic as far as voting was concerned. It was a whole different process, with social distancing and masks and that sort of thing. And now as we seem to be moving into a different time, I hate to say post-pandemic, because I know that people are still getting COVID. Many of them are doing much better, especially if they've been vaccinated. But what has changed since this kind of decrease in COVID cases that we've been seeing? Does that change anything that's happening at the polls?
Well, I actually think that the migration towards the multiple options and being able to go to any location and mailing ballots to every registered voter actually helped us get through the pandemic. Especially the fact that we had the presidential election right in kind of the height of the pandemic, the ability to get ballots in the hands of all of our voters and to give them options for where to return those through the drop boxes, through a kind of a no contact model, really paid off for us and resulted in, there was a lot of concern that we would have a decrease in voter turnout in 2020 because of the pandemic. And we actually didn't. We actually saw a spike in turnout. But I think what we've learned through that process is that options matter, right? And every election is different. It has a different profile, a different culture to it. And I expect in this election, we're going to see people who are going to vote closer to election day or on election day, and people who want to go back and have that in-person voting experience. And so we're geared up for that. But I think probably the most important thing to emphasize is that you as a voter get to choose what option works best for you. And that's the great thing about the locations. They're designed to kind of meet you where you're at. If you're out this weekend doing your weekend activities, our goal is to have somewhere in that vicinity a visible voting location so you can stop in and cast your ballot if you want to. If you want to go on your way to work or where you drop your kids off at daycare, we want to have someplace that's close and convenient for you. So it's not a chore to go and vote. It's actually something that fits within your lifestyle.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like our situations at work, the way that they've changed, the way that we did work during the pandemic. Some of those things have been held over and actually make things work a little bit better on the ground. I'm glad that you mentioned the early voting and showing up at the polls. Are there any pros and cons of one over the other? I mean, obviously, it can make it much more easier for you to schedule it into your life. But in terms of the actual voting process, is there something that people need to consider as pros and cons for either one? Voting in person or voting on election day or voting early?
Yeah, I think most of it is a matter of personal preference, what works best for you. I guess a couple of considerations to think about in making your individual plan to vote is this ballot is long. There's a lot on this ballot. You know, it ranges from things very close to home in your neighborhood, your school district, your water district, possibly a city council member in the city of LA, of course, the contest for mayor of the city. But then it goes up from there. We have countywide offices, we have statewide measures, all the members of our state assembly, our members of Congress that represent us in Congress, and our US Senator are all on the ballot. So there's a lot for voters to navigate through on that ballot, including a pretty significant number of state measures. So in addition to the candidate contest, you have these state measures on some pretty lofty policy issues where voters get to weigh in and actually take the role of a lawmaker. So in that sense, you know, some voters like the ability to work through all of that at home, and the vote by mail ballot helps with that, but they still want to walk that ballot into a voting location because they want that sense of civic engagement of putting into a ballot box at a vote center. So that's perfectly acceptable. If you are someone who kind of is used to navigating things using your personal device, we actually offer what's called an interactive sample ballot, where you can go on our website, pull up that sample ballot, mark your choices before you go to the vote center, and scan them into the device. That can save you a little bit of time. So that's an option to consider. And then I guess the last thing I would say is if you're somebody who maybe puts things off until the last minute, if you're going to wait till election day or late in the day on election day to vote, that's probably where we're going to see our peak level of participation of those vote centers. So you might want to just plan on a little extra time. We've planned for that, and we don't expect there to be long lines or delays in voting, but it is in kind of those final hours where we start to see things pick up. So just a consideration for people to think about.
Well, we've just got a couple minutes left, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about security at the polls, something which never really thought was going to be an issue, but it does seem that that's something people are talking about today. And also the integrity of the vote. How secure is the voting process itself?
Yeah, let me start with the last part of that first, and just say that we believe and we want to convey to voters in LA County that you can have a great deal of confidence in the integrity of your vote. And we don't say that just to take our word for it. The process, as I said before, belongs to the voters. It's a very transparent process. So we have election observers who can watch the entire process. We live stream the processing of our ballots on our website. California has a post-election auditing process to make sure that we do reconciliation, and then we make sure that all of the votes have been processed before we certify the election. So there are a number of checks and balances built into the process to ensure the integrity of it. The security question is an important one this year because we are seeing, again, fortunately, not so much here locally, but we are seeing in other states where there are at least the appearance that there could be efforts to try and intimidate voters or disrupt voters in the act of voting. California law, again, favors the voter in that sense. Our voting locations are neutral locations. We don't allow for electioneering or campaigning in the voting locations. So, you know, even campaign buttons and hats, those are not appropriate in the voting location. And if there is any activity where a voter is being harassed, or if there's intimidation or anything to disrupt the voting process, we have people on standby to respond to that quickly. Fortunately, again, we're not seeing that. That's one of the advantages of this multi-day voting period is allows us to kind of get a sense of what's happening out there in the landscape and be sure that we are resourced to address that. But not too far away. I mean, we are seeing in Arizona where there are some people who are videotaping voters when they're dropping their ballots off at drop boxes, those types of things, not appropriate activities, and something that California has been very adamant about in our election laws. So anybody who sees something like that happening, we definitely want to know about it and we want to respond to it. We don't want anybody to be prevented from casting their ballot.
One final question for you. I know we're very close to the election now, but are there still any opportunities left for volunteers? Is there any need for volunteers at the poll, or is it too late for people to get involved in that this year?
Yeah, because the voting period has already started and those vote centers are already open, and there's extensive training involved, most of those positions have been filled. Where there are opportunities is actually as temporary employees in our office during the post-election period. So to work on that canvassing period and to help us process the vote by mail ballots that are still going to come in even after election day, which always surprises people. But we will literally have hundreds of thousands of vote by mail ballots that are mailed or dropped off on election day that still need to be processed in the days and weeks after the election. So there are opportunities there, and would encourage anyone interested in that to check out the job postings on our website at lavote.gov.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all you do to help get us ready for every election that we have. Dean C. Logan, thank you so much for being with us today. Once again, lavote.gov. lavote.gov is the website that you go to find out about all things Dean Logan and about voting as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to continue our conversation with getting into some of the meat of those propositions that Dean was referring to. And for that, it is my pleasure to bring to the stage Dominique DiPrima, who was my early morning companion for many years when I was driving to work for my morning show, one of the few people who was up with her. And I just always really appreciated her professionalism and her intelligence and her ability to explain complex subjects in a really relatable way. I think that Dominique is a valuable asset to our community. And also, we're really fortunate to have her again on this election forum. You can hear her these days, weekdays from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on KBLA's morning show, First Things First with Dominique DiPrima, where she offers her own special brand of news and commentary. She is somebody I respect and somebody I trust to be fair and honest. I'm pretty sure you feel the same way. So Dominique, as usual, has done her homework and is ready to help demystify some of the ballot measures and propositions that we're going to be voting on in less than a week. So I know you've been busy. Congratulations, by the way, on KBLA. So glad for you to have a bigger forum, for us to have more time with you every day during these troubled times. And I think you're on mute.
I appreciate you, Pat, so much. And one of the great things about this forum is we get to work together. This is our second annual. Yay.
Yeah, we promise we'll do this for you guys all the time. Well, let's just jump right into it. Oh, before we do that, though, I do want to mention that if you have questions, please just put them in the chat. We will answer those questions and you'll be able to find the answers on the website. And also that's where you'll get a link to this conversation, because after we're done, it's going to be recorded for you. All right, so why do we need to vote? And what makes this election so important? This one feels really huge.
It is really huge. And I think there's a lot of important things on the ballot if you're in California, some of them symbolic, but some of them really bread and butter day to day about the kinds of issues we care about, which for many of us is the economy. How do we get the houseless situation under control? What things can we do that might change our day-to-day struggles economically? And then, public safety, of course, is a huge issue. It plays out in the candidates, but it also plays out in the propositions.
Yeah, we see a lot of that going on right now. I think that we want to encourage people to vote, but also we want to encourage people to be informed voters and to know something about the issues that they're looking at. And we were talking the other day just about the fact that we've got some local issues, some local ballot measures, and we've also got some state propositions. And I think that sometimes people don't understand the difference. Is there a difference between them, and what weighs of more importance?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If it's called a proposition, it's a statewide thing. So, and everyone in California is voting on it, and it tends to be more broad. If it's a measure, it's usually city or county, and those change according to which city you live in and what county in California you reside in. We are located in LA County, so we'll vote on the county measures for Los Angeles, and Los Angeles City is where I live. So I'll also vote on city measures. Then even within cities, you've got different districts. So you have to vote on different lawmakers from different districts, but the measures and the propositions are both quite important. So it's good to try to look at both of them if you can.
Yeah, I moved to California 21 years ago, and everywhere I have lived, there's nothing like this. All of these, like, what do the elected lawmakers do? We make all the rules, but there's a lot to know, and a lot of it, as Dominique said, really affects our lives. So let's get into some of the ballot measures first, and then we'll talk.
Okay, you want to start with city and county and move to the state?
Yep. So
Okay,
let's
let's
dive
do that.
in with, why don't we start with Proposition LH? And that's the one for authorization for additional low-income housing. Yes means you approve, right? And no, you disapprove.
Right. LH is a measure for the city of Los Angeles. And what it does is if you vote yes, you're voting to authorize 5,000 more low-income housing units in each council district. That may seem like duh, but the thing is, there is an archaic law that caps the number of low-income housing units in each council district. It was actually meant to keep Black people out by keeping the number of low-income housing units down. Not that we're all low income, but that was the thinking at the time. So we need to, if you want to increase the capacity to build more low-income housing, we need to get rid of that law, and that would be a yes on LH. If you want to keep things the way they are with a cap on low-income housing to keep those pesky Black people out of various council districts, then you're going to vote no on LH.
See what I mean about explaining it succinctly? Let's look at Proposition SP. That's a one for funding for parks and open spaces. And yes means you approve it, no, you would disapprove. And let's also talk a little bit about how that would be paid for, because I think that's an important part of all of these as well. Some of these measures are great, but you have to really look at where the money is going to come from.
Well, Measure SP is also a little bit misleading. Surprise. Measure SP is for funding for parks, but the thing about it is it's authored by City Council member Joe Buscaino, who earlier in the year authored another measure that was meant to fund the Olympics. That measure was struck down before it even got to the ballot. So now he's pivoted, and this is, many people say it is funding for the Olympics disguised as funding for parks. And that's why many groups, liberal and progressive groups that you would normally expect to vote yes on something like park funding, are recommending a no vote on this, including the LA Progressive, LA Knock, and the LA Times, surprisingly enough.
So you really have to read and research these things, I tell you, because it is really confusing. And a new parcel tax would be what would pay for that? Is that how they would pay for this?
Well, this is funds that come out of the city's Department and Recs budget, I believe. So yes, it would be a tax that would actually be like a slush fund for the Olympics. I don't know all of the mechanics of how it comes out, but it's a parcel tax at 8.4 cents per square foot on real estate. So it is coming out of the taxpayer dollars for people that own property. But again, it's where the money's going to that's more controversial in this particular measure.
Let's talk about ULA. That is to fund affordable housing, tenant assistance programs, also through a property transfer tax on real estate property sales or transfers that are valued at between $5 and $10 million. Yes means you approve of this, no means you disapprove. Let's get into that one a little bit.
ULA is a very hotly contested measure because it taxes the wealthy to not just build housing for the unhoused, but also to try to prevent more evictions. Because one of the reasons why we're not getting a handle on the homeless crisis, right now we are getting 20 people off the streets per day out of homelessness, but 25 are falling into homelessness. So if you do the math, you can see that we will never, ever catch up. So even though some people are burnt out because of Measure HH and Measure HHH, this particular measure was put together by a lot of the houseless advocates, people like LA Community Action Network and ACE. So if you vote yes, you're voting to spend more money to get people out of houselessness and to prevent evictions. And it's coming from taxes on the very rich. So 5 million and up, if your house is sold. And so if you're not selling a house that's worth 5 million plus, then you won't be taxed to pay for this. So a yes is you want to tax the rich to help the unhoused and those about to lose their houses. And a no means you don't want to create this tax and you want to leave things as they are.
And the people who are affected by this one, really, we're talking about a pretty small amount of people, right? People who have
Yeah, as
5
far
and
as the
$10 million
people that would be
homes.
paying, yeah. I think the people that will be getting helped is a much larger number, although I don't have the numbers right in front of me. But yeah, it's only 5 million and up that will pay this. And so most people's homes, and that has to be when you're selling it. It's not just a tax when you're just owning the home, it's for transfer of property. So
Yeah.
it is a small group of people, but it's a significant amount of money.
Yeah, but I think also that for these people, the benefit is the same benefit as for all of us. It's a quality of life issue. If we can do something about homelessness, it's a compassion project on one hand, but it also does improve the quality of life of all of us who live in this city. And I think that's something to consider. Just in case you have,
Absolutely.
just in case you have a
Absolutely.
$10 million house that you're about to sell, and you know.
Yeah, I wish. But no, I think that's right, because the issues around houselessness have become front and center in this election. And this is one time when we cannot get weary in our well-doing, because what we've done so far hasn't solved the problem. It just might not be enough yet. It doesn't mean it's not effective.
Exactly. And I think we have another measure LA. That's the LA Community College District Special Election. Do you know about that one?
Yeah, the LA, that's asking for more money to fix up our community colleges, our campuses, upgrade the facilities, and the infrastructure. But again, many are urging a no vote on this. If you vote yes, it means you want to give the community college district more money to fix up those schools. If you vote no, it means you don't want to spend this money right now. And the reason some folks are saying not right now is we just passed a huge bond for community colleges recently, and there's been some corruption and mismanagement of funds within the community college board. So opponents of this are saying, let's elect a new college board, which is also on the ballot, and then talk about whether or not they're ready to receive more money once they clean house. So if you're worried about oversight, you might vote no on this and, hold off for a later day. If you're considering this urgent to get money to these colleges to upgrade them and you're not as worried about oversight, you'll go ahead and vote yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of context to most of these issues that we really need to discuss in detail. Let's hop over to some of the propositions now.
Okay, let's do it, Pat.
Proposition 1. Let us
Yes.
begin with abortion. It says abortion, constitutional language. What exactly is this all about?
So this is about amending the California Constitution to help protect a woman's right to agency over her body. And the reason I say it that way is not just to be politically correct, but because it is not only abortion, it's also contraception. So what this is doing is enshrining into the California state constitution the fact that women have a right to control their birth control and their pregnancy termination, abortion, or other procedures. So this would make it harder to infringe upon the rights of California women.
Yeah, we're beginning to see how a lot of these issues become more and more important as we look at the national landscape and see some of the changes that are happening there. And many states are taking certain issues in their own hands.
Yeah.
So it's probably more important than ever that we're really aware of these things and what the issues are behind all of it.
Right. So yes means you want to protect a woman's right to choose to terminate a pregnancy or have contraception, and no means you want to leave things as they are and leave women vulnerable to the whims of the U.S. Supreme Court and the U.S. Congress.
I guess, during this time of year, we always see so many different ads, but I must say the ads that have confounded me the most are are 26 and 27. The ones that deal with the casinos. I have seen so many things. And my basic rule of thumb, Dominique, is to follow the money, to
Right.
try to just see who paid for this. And by the way, Politico does a really good job of breaking that down. How
Yes,
much
yes.
money is spent on each side, because I think that really makes a difference. But they are very clever with how they name some of the entities, these PACs that come out and they make up a name that makes it sound like they're really on the other side of the issue. And how do we avoid that or understand that or get around that?
Yeah, well, I think what you said, follow the money, but I wish it was illegal. It's like they try to name it the opposite of what it is, or something totally random. So 26 and 27 are both different ways of legalizing betting on sports. That's what they are. I don't care what the ads say. The ads talk about homelessness, it'll give you a new boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean, it's like everything but the kitchen sink. But what they're actually about is legalizing betting on gambling in the state of California, one online and one in person. That's all it is. And so if you vote yes, you want to make gambling legal in the state of California, betting on sports. And if you vote no, it means you don't want to have legal sports betting in the state of California. Now, 26 is in person. So that would be at the tribal casinos. So some people feel like that's supporting, Native American, indigenous, tribal casinos. And then 27 is about online. And so that would bring a lot of the money to the big online sports betting companies. Many complain that takes dollars out of the state of California and jobs out of the state of California and turns your phone into a casino, which is concerning for people who think about people who are addicted to gambling and the possibility of teenagers gambling away their money or your money while they're at high school. So a lot of concerns here and a lot of money, Pat.
A lot.
But no, if you don't want sports gambling, you vote no on 26 and 27. If you do want it, you've got to decide whether it's online or in casinos. If you want it in person, yes on 26. If you want it online, yes on 27.
The thing that confuses me though about 26 is that isn't sports betting already allowed on tribal lands?
No.
I mean, isn't that where the casinos are?
Yeah, but not on football games and stuff like that. You can't, no, it's not legal right now. You can bet on certain horse races. Yeah. Football, baseball. No, it's only recently been legalized. And now certain states have it, but California doesn't yet. And it's worth noting that some of the states that have it have had some unintended consequences, like spikes in gambling addiction and other kinds of, unintended consequences that can come with the creation of a massive gambling infrastructure in your state.
Well, one of the things that was interesting too is when you look at the one about betting on tribal lands, the big casino, I mean, the big entities are all in favor of that. The smaller casinos are against it. And with the online sports betting, as you said, your DraftKings and all of these people that are advertising all over the place now to just go online and bet on everything are in favor of that overwhelmingly, because obviously there's a self-gratification that's connected.
I mean, it is worth asking. America is addicted to porn on their phones. If sports gambling is on here too, will anything be left in anybody's bank account? IJS.
Yeah, and if you've ever had to deal with gambling addiction, it's just like dealing with any other addiction. It can be devastating to families. Well, there's one thing that's really good, Proposition 28. I kind of like that.
Yes.
The auto music for pre-K through 12 funding, and it looks like everybody likes this, Dominique.
Everybody, there's no opposition.
There's no
I don't know that I've ever heard of that before, but no, 28 has no opposition.
And look at how much we need these things in our schools. When we were growing up, you had music classes, everyone could participate in sports. And these were good things that created well-rounded individuals, that taught us teamwork and how to get along with people, something that we seem to be forgetting in this country. So I think bringing that back, I'm all for it.
For me, it's part of the healing from the pandemic, all of the mental health damage that has been done, and the lack of social emotional progress for our children can be partly made up through the arts, the self-expression, the creativity. All of the things that come with arts education are the very same things that get us through tough times and keep us in school when we feel like dropping out. So I think now is a perfect time for Prop 28. And I can say that since it has no opposition.
Exactly. That's wonderful. So we can move right along
Yes.
to Proposition 29, which I will say this is the third time in 4 years that we have seen this kidney dialysis rule reform. Why is this such a big issue? And can you explain the two sides of it?
It is confusing as heck. Basically, it's the dialysis companies against the labor unions, really what it comes down to. Labor unions putting money behind this proposition to try to force dialysis centers to have certain staffing and meet certain safety requirements, like having a nurse practitioner, a doctor, or a nurse on site at dialysis centers. The dialysis centers would say, we already have enough staff. This is going to cost more money. It's going to raise the price of dialysis, and they're fighting it out at the ballot box. These are the times when California's initiative process does seem burdensome. It seems like something that should be worked out in the courts or at a negotiating table, but instead the unions and the dialysis industry, which is a huge industry, keep fighting it out on the ballot.
And trying to make us figure it out.
So yes means you want a nurse practitioner, a doctor, or a nurse, and other safety requirements in these dialysis centers. No, which is what the dialysis industry wants you to vote, is saying that you want to leave things as they are. The LA Times says no, because they say this is a union trying to sneak in through a side door and impose their working conditions on the dialysis centers. The Progressive says yes, because they say, why is it too much to ask to have a qualified medical professional on site at a dialysis center?
Yeah, that seems to me like that actually makes sense. But we want you to make your own decision. What we think doesn't really matter. Okay, Proposition 30. This is the wealth tax to support clean air programs. How wealthy do you have to be to pay this one?
Well, you know what? This is a tax on really on the wealthy for sure. Income over $2 million. I don't know about you, Pat, but I won't be paying that tax.
I'm not there.
But the thing that makes this controversial is because what it does is it taxes these wealthy people. Mm-hmm. So this is tax money that doesn't exist right now. It's a new source of revenue from the very wealthy. But I mean, you can only tax so many people so many times, right?
Right.
And this money is a set aside that's meant to pay for electric vehicles. The reason why people say Lyft is pushing it, and they have put money behind this, is because the state is requiring Lyft to use electric vehicles. And this makes it easier for people to buy electric vehicles. So there will be more available Lyft drivers that have electric cars. It doesn't mean that Lyft is going to go buy a bunch of cars for their fleet and you're going to pay for it. It means that if you and I want to drive Lyft, we can get help buying an electric car.
Right.
People that are against it say, why take this money and set it aside for electric cars? What if the schools need it, which is why UTLA is against it? What if we have another financial crisis and we need it for the pandemic? So those folks are saying, no, we already have money put aside in Gavin Newsom's plan for electric cars. Why do we need this? Others are saying, why not? It has a sunset clause, so the tax is not forever.
Okay, so that means we could see it again if it doesn't make it this time.
Yeah, and even if it does, it will only last. I can't remember if it's two to 5 years, somewhere in there. It only lasts for a finite amount of time till we buy up these cars, and then that tax would go away.
And sometimes things like this are really just, I guess, people's creative ideas for how to find the money to do these things that are important to us all. Clean air, certainly one of the biggest issues of our time.
Right.
And
So
if not this, what something.
So if you vote yes, it means you want to tax people who make more than $2 million on top of what they're already being taxed to help pay for electric cars, which would help Lyft and also help people who want electric cars. You vote no, you don't want to set aside that money. You think maybe we need it for something else, and you want to leave things the way they are.
Okay, and the last proposition we have is Proposition 31, and that is to uphold the flavored tobacco ban. And this was something that was started just a few years ago, right?
Yeah, it's a few years ago, this campaign started. It's really picked up steam. It's one of those things that is also on the national agenda. The Biden administration has indicated that they may ban flavored tobaccos nationwide in the next year or two. But right now, it's a state by state issue. The legislators already passed this, but tobacco put it on the ballot because they want the voters to say, are you sure? Are you sure? And that's what this is. It is, yes, if you feel that flavored tobacco, including, the whole menthol items should be banned. They tend to be targeted towards kids, which is one of the main reasons for this initiative and the whole momentum of this movement is because they're targeting kids, and the flavored tobacco makes it go down easy and makes kids addicted and creates a whole new generation of smokers and tobacco users, whether they're vaping or actually lighting up. If you say yes, you want the ban. If you say no, you want to leave things the way they are.
Okay, sounds good. I want to do something that we didn't do last time, and that is to talk a little bit about some of the judges. I noticed that when I go in to vote and I start to look at all of these names of the judges, I don't know who these people are. I don't have any way of trying to figure out who's better. First of all, how do you judge a judge? And second of all, because you and I have discussed this before, I know that you've had the opportunity to speak to a number of these people, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you've learned, and if you can specifically, without necessarily favoring one over another, but to tell us a little bit about these candidates.
I'm not allowed to favor anyone. Okay, so
No,
when
not out loud.
not out loud. Okay, so when it comes to judges, yeah, it's definitely deer in headlights time on the ballot. Many times, like, I don't know. But with judges, there are some ways to judge. There are slates, just like any other set of candidates. You can look on the LA County Democratic Party or the Republican Party, a website. They have recommendations. People like Maxine Waters, the LA Progressive, the LA Times, all of these folks that defend the La Defensa, Knock LA, all of these have slates. And you can look at what they say about the judges. One thing about judges, which is I found from interviewing a lot of them, is that we look at the ratings of the California Bar Association and we think, oh, well, they know what they're talking about. So if they say qualified, I'll vote yes. But that's a little tricky because it turns out that the California Bar Association is sort of like the Academy for the Academy Awards. It's a bunch of older white folks that have been doing that for a long time. It's a volunteer organization, but yet it's very insular. So many times they are more of a popularity contest, and the people that are popular don't look like you and me. So when that may not be the best way to judge the judges, or at least add other factors and take it with a grain of salt. One thing that I will point out in this cycle, you have a lot of public defenders running for judge, usually, and civil rights attorneys. Usually it's all prosecutors. So if you think about that in the realm of justice, right? Public defenders are the ones that are working with the public, the people that are charged with crimes, the people that have no money, the people in the community. The prosecutors are the ones, obviously, that are bringing those charges. So there are many people who feel that it is time to have more public defenders on the bench, more women, more people of color, in order to create more balance. So I don't know if you want to go through any of these seats specifically, but you can see that there is a movement. There are more public defenders running for judge than ever before in California.
I think we do have time to take a look at a few of them if you want to. Any races that stand out to you where the candidates are particularly diametrically opposed, or anything like that, where there's a stark difference?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you have, if you're talking about the LA County Superior Court, there's a group called the Defenders of Justice. It's 4 women. They're all public defenders or civil rights attorneys, and they have created a slate and they are in many cases running against prosecutors. So again, that's that dynamic. Seat number 60, or they call them office or seat number 60, LA County Superior Court. You have Anna Slotky-Ritano. She is running against, she is a public defender, and she's running against Abby Barron, who's a prosecutor. So you've got different sides of the law. This woman, Anna Slotky-Ritano, is a public defender. So again, a more restorative justice approach versus a more traditional sort of carceral approach. In seat 67, or office 67, you have Elizabeth Lashley Haynes, who is also one of these defenders of justice. She's also a public defender, and she's running against another prosecutor. This one pretty hard-charging prosecutor, who I actually have interviewed almost all these folks, named Fernanda Maria Barreto, and she has been endorsed by police association. So again, you have a pretty strong contrast between a public defender and a super law and order prosecutor. Seat 70, you've got an African-American woman, Holly Hancock. She is the only Black member of the Defenders of Justice. She is a public defender also, and she's in charge of the record expungement, a unit of the public defenders, goes around with working with homeless people, helping to clear their records and get them paperwork. And again, she's running against a prosecutor. So this is another, a seat where you have a pretty stark contrast. That's for office 70. And the fourth public defender, well, she's not a public defender, she's a civil rights attorney, but she's a member of the Defenders of Justice, is a Korean American woman named Carolyn G. Young Park. She's running for seat 118, and she's actually, again, quite a contrast from the person that she's running against, because she has not only is a civil rights attorney, she's volunteered for Black Lives Matter. She's volunteered for a new way of life, which is a prison reentry program for women in South LA.
And what does it take to be eligible to be one of these county judges?
Great question. Well, you have to be an attorney, and and you've got to be, you have to have experience. I think that's about it, because there were a couple people that ran in the primary who were attorneys with very little courtroom experience and who had never been prosecutors or public defenders. But generally, it's a rubber stamp, Pat, where prosecutors just go from the DA's office to the bench. That's been the typical path.
Well, in the time that we have left, I'd like to talk a little bit just about the vote itself, and about, we talked about how people spend so much money from all these different entities to influence the vote, to be able to benefit their own particular self-interest. How do we as regular citizens influence the vote? And I think it's something we need to really think about a lot. We've seen grassroots movements over the years that have made huge differences in the outcome of these contests. And I know that for this coming election, how do we get people to leave their house, or to do the work that we're talking about doing that's involved, to figure out who you're going to vote for and to participate in this process? Let's start, first of all, by talking about young people. You have a young person in your home, someone who's going to be headed to college soon. So he's of that age. He's old enough. Is he old enough to vote yet?
Yeah. He just had his birthday.
Okay, so let's talk about this.
Yeah.
About your son and his friends and their whole group of people. How do we reach them and help them to understand that they can actually influence their future?
Well, you know what? I think they do understand. I think the problem for a lot of young people, at least the ones I talk to, is that they just think we are too, sold out, complacent, and useless. To where they don't have faith that the issues on the ballot are important enough for them to go and vote for. And I think what we do is we make the case that's not true, at least not this election cycle. I mean, certainly arts in schools is something that would affect every young person and something they probably care about. But also, making sure they're registered, and that folks know that you can register in California on election day. So now early voting is open. They can register at any voting center, but they can also register at any vote center on election day. So if you've got a young person in your house or an old person, or just someone who's young, but not that young, but still hasn't started voting, you can take them with you on election day and get them registered that day, or go to an early vote center and get them registered and vote on the spot. So we've made it easier in California. I also think maybe people can get inspired by the fact that in LA, we have, like, for example, a mayor's race where you have a billionaire who has $100 million of his own money. Well, and then 4 million of police union money versus a regular person, community organizer, congresswoman who only has 4 million or $5 million. It's so at a certain point, people power, whether, people are going out to vote their conscience, or whether they're volunteering to walk precincts, knock on doors, do texting. It's not just about voting at this point. People, if they are interested in, impacting a campaign, there's more you can do. It doesn't have to be that difficult. You can go to the website of the candidate that you're interested in and sign up on the spot, sometimes for virtual help. You can call your friends, make sure your grandma votes. This is a really important election, and there's a lot of candidates and issues on the ballot that impact young and old.
Well, for sure, it seems that part of the problem is a crisis in confidence in the system itself. And I don't know that people really understand the whole idea of numbers. I mean, to make people really understand that every vote counts. And I'm sure you've seen some of that lack of confidence and maybe different ways people address that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the last election, if you look at 2016, when Donald Trump was elected, although he didn't win the popular vote, he won the Electoral College. But in certain states, we are talking about a difference of maybe 30,000 votes, which might sound like a lot of people, but more people go to a Beyonce concert, right? So I think, and even if you look at, like, say, Kamala Harris, who's now the vice president, when she won statewide office, it was by like 300 or 400 votes when she first won statewide office. And so if you think about it, that's probably you, your friends, and their friends, right? And so some of these races like city council, 1,000 votes can be the whole difference. You know what I mean? So actually hundreds of votes can impact when you're talking about these ballot measures, city measures. So your vote does make a difference. And the more local you get, the more each vote has an impact.
Well, one other issue is the fact that, we see races across the country that are razor thin, that are races that have consequences to all of us in the country. And I'm kind of interested in what you think we can do to impact elections in other places. Some of these Senate races, some of these House races. I know every time I turn around, people are asking for more money to help get the ads out there. But I think that there's something to be said about the drum, about if you've got 15 people in your family who haven't been voting, who are apathetic about voting, who maybe live in some of these cities. I know in the last presidential election, I called all my nieces and nephews in Atlanta. My nephew said to me, Auntie, sometimes when you live in Atlanta, you forget you live in Georgia. He's like, isn't it going to be okay? But I think that we can have some impact, can't we, across the country?
I love that. Yeah, we got to call our nieces, nephews, grannies, grandpas in other states. I think that we do have to send money. Money makes a difference. If you got $1, $10, or you're a thousandaire or a millionaire, every buck counts, especially when you're talking about women and people of color as candidates. We tend to have not as deep of a war chest, so every dollar counts. And even though we like to clown social media activism, it actually does make a difference. Those tweet storms, letting people know about different initiatives or different accomplishments that have been made by various candidates, and what propositions mean and how you're voting. All of those things really do create momentum. So I think we got to fight on every front. I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and.
Yeah, I think we really have a lot of work to do, but I do believe that together we can do it. And a huge part of it is being informed about the issues and about the people that you're voting for, so that our vote does really count to make a difference. Now, I know that there are a lot of resources that are available too, and I would love if you would share some of them. You are a wealth of knowledge. I know that this information didn't just jump in your head, that there are places that you go to seek this out on the regular. Tell us about some websites maybe that people can check out or other resources.
Yeah, I mean, I like to look at the far left, the far right, and all the sort of just plain informational neutral sites. So the League of Women Voters is always good. I like Ballotpedia. On Ballotpedia, you can type in your own state, your city, your zip code, and they'll give you your ballot and tell you the basics about candidates and propositions, who's for it, who's against it. I like to go to, I look at the local newspapers. I'll look at, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times. I will look at the Los Angeles Progressive. I'll look at NOC LA. I'll look at La Defensa. And I really want to see where these folks are coming from. I'll also look at lawmakers. And then, of course, your county Democratic and Republican parties. You can compare and contrast. LACDP.org is the Democratic Party. I'm a registered Democrat, so I don't know the Republican one by heart. But if you just type in LA County Republican Party, it will pop up, and you can compare. And that's a really good way to make up your own mind.
Yeah, well, I tell you, we're going to be posting, as I mentioned earlier, this entire conversation online. That's going to happen later on this evening. If you got questions, we want you to put them in the chat. They're going to be answered on our website at theblackmediacollective.com. That is theblackmediacollective.com. And if you go to the website, you will see links tomorrow to view it on Facebook Live and on YouTube. And we want you to please post those links on your network. Excuse me, as Dominique said, there is a power in social networking, and this is the way to use it. You can share that information because we do have a critical election that is coming up next Tuesday. And we plan to be there.
I want to also thank the Black Media Collective for doing this. Once again, last time we did it, the thing got a lot of views. People panic at the last minute. They want to be able to see something succinct. So thank you guys so much for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. Dominique, you are awesome. You have just really just opened up my eyes personally to a lot of these propositions and measures. And I'm sure I am not alone. I've gotten texts and said, oh, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. So thank you so much. And
I want to mention too, you can get all this information on a regular basis if you listen to Dominique every morning, Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 a.m. because she's always dropping some science on us.
Yes. And Pat, thank you so much. I miss you already at the wave, but you're my girl, so our paths are going to always cross.
I'm still here for the community always.
Yes. And thank you to Dean Logan. Always a pleasure with, his participation for this as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate your support, and be sure to go to those polls on ballot day. Good night.